15.
Welcome back to another episode of the Avoid Crisis podcast with my co-host Alan Plyler. Alan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ray. How are you doing? Good to see you.
All right, good to see you, and thank you so much for lining up our guest for today. We're continuing in our journey, the Wizards of AI, and finding some really great jewels and nuggets out here in this rapidly growing AI space. Alan, tell us about how you found our guest today. We're going to introduce you guys in just a second, but we want to give our listeners, a peek of where we're headed today.
Well, as you know, first of all, I'm going to introduce both. We got the CEO of Pangea Social here, Lawrence Hall, and we have the head of growth here, Eric Forst. And to give you a little bit of background of how I met them, I've been going to a lot of the AI get-togethers and networking events, and that's where the VC capital investors and where the founders and a lot of the participants in the AI world have been meeting. And one of the events that I attended, Eric was actually one of the speakers. And so um, he ended up giving a little bit of a speech. He said something about his background in writing. And so I walked up to him and I said, everyone else was trying to talk to him. I said, so you're the poetry man. And with that opening, I kind of got him to loosen up a little bit. And we started talking. And then from that, ended up getting a chance to learn a little bit about what they're doing, and it's a really exciting thing that's happening. And I don't want to take away from a lot of how they can describe it, so maybe we should just jump in and talk to them a little bit about what they've done in AI world and this amazing tool that they brought together and where it's going.
Sounds great. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Give us a minute about your background, Eric. We're going to get to you next. I want to hear this story with Alan, but Lawrence, welcome to the show, and introduce yourself, please, and tell us a bit about Pangea
Sure,
Social.
sure. So Pangea was born from a desire to improve online discourse. And because we saw such a degradation in that discourse as social media has evolved, the urgency of this has just been rising like every year. And our personal experiences, not only with like divisive, unproductive online interactions, but also with deeper issues in society, is what really propelled us. And so, like I think that the thing that really grabs me about social media is that it affects our belief structures, and it affects them directly, and it affects them in invisible ways that we can't really track. So when you look at like the Facebook survey that showed that they could just throw a couple of 100,000 little ads out there and shift like people's voting habits by 3 or 4 basis points, that's trouble, and I think it's the tip of the iceberg. So when I grew up, belief structures were probably what saved us. I grew up during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was actually rather traumatizing because I grew up in a small town with 2 Nike X missile bases. I was a Cub Scout, so I got to visit, the control site and talk to the radar techs. And as a Cub Scout, I asked, how long does it take from the time you pick up the missiles in the Alaska frontier to the time they're going to hit us right here in town? And the guy says, well, you got about 13 minutes. And I went back home to my mom and I said, why did you pick this country to move to? And she said, they were refugees from the Second World War. They could have picked any country, right? But they picked this one. And she says, well, I picked this country because in World War III, this one is probably going to win. And I go, well, okay, you know,
Right.
I still had nightmares for weeks, you know. So like it was like I realized that there are just a handful of guys that they were in a position to push the button, and if any one of the six of them had pushed the button, we wouldn't be talking here today. And when I realized that, I was thinking, wow, it was just their beliefs that stopped them. That was the only thing that stopped, us from annihilation. So I decided beliefs are super important. And when I went to school, I tried to get to the bottom of why some people would choose to destroy the world and other people would choose not to, and tried to figure out, well, where does that line of reasoning start? Or if it's not even reasoning, where does it start? And of course, as you imagine, a school wasn't really the place where they answer that question. So I had a well, let's say, a very interesting ride through I don't know, Exeter and Columbia, and you know, one in maybe 10 professors would even, you know, just tickle the subject a little bit. I started finding out things that I found quite disturbing about philosophy and science and how it was all developed. you know, one of the most disturbing things was I took operations research as a major and studied linear programming, and I realized that linear programming is a way to make a lot of money, and yet it was completely heartless. I mean, when a linear program optimizes the economy, there's no heart in it. You know, it will just like reassign resources based on profit alone. And it occurred to me that there was going to be a problem because eventually that profit motive was going to make people really unhappy. They might be making more money than ever, but they were going to be miserable because everything they cared about was being just completely swept away. So I thought there had to be a better way. There had to be something there. And, my, I don't know, it was a rather depressing time. So like my first job out of Columbia was working in a tax leverage limited partnership brokerage that had a trading program that I was assigned to. It was like a little service bureau for the first bunch of program traders. So if there was any great, you couldn't imagine. It was really the movie Trading Places was exactly where I was working, except that the timeline in the movie was compressed. You know, like what happened during the span of the movie would take 3 years where I was working, but it would still happen anyway.
It sounds, Lawrence, like you had a lot of different thoughts, and there's a lot of balance that you're talking about. One is that, people need to work in order to make money, and at the same time, what they do and how they express their thoughts, it really has an influence on other people. And we see that in the work environment, we see it in the media, and from all those different experiences that you had the opportunity to make a lot of money, and you may have done pretty well, but at some point you had a turn to where you said, okay, I'm now going to focus on this.
Yeah.
And that focus on this, what was that? What was the
Well,
moment that kind of drove you to that?
it was really hard on my health working with these people who were total egomaniacs, and I couldn't do it anymore. And at a certain point, as much as I wanted to just make enough money to retire and just get out of there, I couldn't even hang on quite long enough for that. So I looked at everything I did, and the programs I was managing were actually very interesting. They were some of the first programs that used options to predict when the stock prices were going to, because the theory was
Sure.
the options were being bought by people who are a little smarter. So what they did in their trades were going to be a presentiment of what the market was going to do. So we had that program, and it was actually used as one of the 8 primary programs at Bear Stearns, which is how that company was keeping itself afloat. It was like every month we had to bill Bear Stearns for this indicator that we were carefully
Hmm.
curating, and so I learned that this was a big time deal. I could see that program trading was going to be the future. We were the first. And I saw that the most invaluable thing about it was the AI. It was the idea that the computer could detect something that the people could not. That there was
Okay.
something in all that data, all those options trays added up to a meaning that was beyond the reach of a human being, and you had to use a computer to get to it. So I studied that subject thoroughly, and found all the best researchers at that time. It's just like, 1985, 6. The best ones were all at CMU. I mean, Jeffrey Hinton, the father of neural nets, he was at CMU. And Herb Simon, the Nobel Prize winning economist, CMU. And the guy who proposed the idea of hill climbing and AI, where the AI is self-optimizing, also CMU. So I said, I got to head over to CMU, and I moved to Pittsburgh. People in Wall Street thought I was nuts. They thought, you're going to give up this career here? I had offers at all these like institutions, and I probably should have taken one or two. Like looking back on it, it would have been much easier life. But
Well, you were like right there at Three Rivers Stadium, so and
yeah, I
now
really
Heinz
was.
Field,
I
and
actually made a
yeah,
wish that I would work for some kind of like important company right there at there's this train plaza they renovated into Station Square, which is like
hmm
a really nice shopping
sure.
mall. And so I sat on a bench at Station Square and I said, I make this wish now. I'm going to have a really great job here at Station Square with really great people. And what was really weird is I had just finished my first day at work at a job just like that. Went down to eat lunch, sat on the bench, and says, "Damn, it's the same damn bench. I got my wish." It was like,
Eric, I don't know if you know this, but where Pittsburgh is, there's two rivers that come together to form the Ohio River. Um, you've got the Allegheny coming in there, and then you've got the Monongahela, Youghiogheny branches that come back in, and they form the Ohio at a place called Point Park. But right around that area, there is a replica steamship type thing called the Gateway Clipper, and that's a big thing to get your celebration for. So when you guys go public, maybe you can like go ahead and charter out the Gateway Clipper and bring back some memories of the time that Lawrence has been here in in Pittsburgh. So
yeah, well, that's a crazy city.
yeah.
Really, I think the best thing about the city is it kind of forges you because you become very internal in a city like that. You start to focus on what you believe on, and you try to make it a life, real life. Like you say, this is what I believe in. I want to enjoy the whole thing, and so you get these great artists like Martha Graham, or they end up never letting go of their dream, which is what I like about Pittsburgh. But
So,
on the
so that was
downside, it's a tough place to make a buck.
so Pittsburgh was the route, where I think then your AI path started.
Yeah,
So jump us now forward then to how how you then implemented that in Pangea
sure.
Social, and
Yeah.
then once we get that foundation, Eric, I tell you, you're up next, and we're going to talk
Well,
about how do we take that idea and grow it. So
just
how,
before you jump into that, I wanted to just add one other thing about when Lawrence is talking about CMU, you may not know just how much tech is involved in Pittsburgh, but autonomous driving, a lot of the fundamental logic that we have in autonomous driving, so think about all the different vehicles that are out there right now, comes from learnings that came from the tech centers in Pittsburgh. And part of the reason was that it was one of the most difficult places to drive around. And so they figured, what a wonderful battleground to test the tech. So, uh,
I got to see one of the very first autonomous driving projects at Pittsburgh, and it was pretty funny because you get a bunch of very young grad students, and they put together this algorithm, and so like there's this autonomous vehicle is trying to follow one of those twisty paths through campus,
mhm,
and so it shows the camera, it shows what the camera sees, it shows every single thing, it identifies objects like where the edge of the path is, where the trees are, and all that. And so like it's coming up the path and it's doing fine until this female jogger runs by with her white pants and her white shorts, and her white shorts are like wiggling around. Sure enough, the thing goes draws a thing around the white pants and starts following her. And it goes right off the path. And I'm going, sure enough, a bunch of grad students who like
right.
would
The
latch
pro-
on to the jogger and follow her, instead of
we're
the
we're going to come back to that concept. We're going to talk about bias in AI, but I want to get to the foundation, how Pangea, that it got started, and then we're going to talk about the
yeah.
growth of that idea, and that's where Eric's going to come in.
So Eric and I had a startup earlier called Synapsify, and we had taken a dictionary that was the WordNet dictionary, and used that in combination with some sentiment detection algorithms to do, like this early sentiment detection stuff for people, like to keep track of how well their marketing was doing, that kind of thing. So the problem was the dictionary was never enough. It never had the right terms in them. The terms weren't weighted properly. We needed some way to automatically construct dictionaries, and I probably spent half of our burn trying to construct an automatic dictionary constructor, and didn't quite get there. But along the way, I realized that there had to be some fundamental ordering concepts that would enable me to do that. So 2.5 years after we folded that company, I did discover some fundamental algorithms that would lead us to automated dictionary construction. And that's where Pangea really started, because once I realized that the computer could figure out the real meaning of words, not like some kind of fake meaning, but really the real deeper meaning of words. Then I realized that that meaning was the very thing I was struggling for from the beginning of my life, which is, where do these beliefs that you have to not press the button, where do these beliefs come from? And what is the meaning of those beliefs?
Interesting. Okay, so we now have an AI algorithm that you've developed. You're launching it under the entity Pangea Social. And Eric, what is the path for growth? What's the business model, and how does this get monetized? Where, maybe either of you, where's the funding coming from to start this, and take us on the journey from here now that Lawrence has kind of set us up to this point?
Sure. I'm happy to take you through that. I do want to just back up a step and talk a little bit about how I got to know Lawrence and work with him on this project, and then I'll segue into the growth path. So, as Lawrence mentioned, when we met, he had this startup called Synapsify, and I had been working with AI at a company called Visible Technologies from 2007 to 2012. We were one of the first companies that did social media sentiment analysis. And, we had positive, negative, neutral sentiment. We used machine learning and NLP, and it was pretty good. And we had sold it into the Obama for America campaign, and they were using it for precinct level sentiment analysis. And it's one of the great regrets of my life that a few years later, Cambridge Analytica picked up on that technique, and they perfected micro-targeting content based on precinct level sentiment analysis to kind of, create this authoritarian movement around the globe on social media. And so when I met Lawrence, he had 32 different dimensions of sentiment and a much more nuanced way of thinking about it. And as he mentioned, we ran into these scaling problems with this manual dictionary construction. So I was really excited a couple of years ago when he filed the new patent that forms the basis of Pangea Social, and we had a way to really address the root cause of this sort of social media dystopia that has been unleashed on us by these algorithms. So the problem is that you have ad-supported social media, and when you have an ad-supported network, that's how you make your money. You optimize the algorithm for moral outrage, and you can look at The Social Dilemma, or you can read Twitter and the Tear Gas by Zeynep Tufekci, and they've interviewed all the engineers at YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and they all admit, this was the easiest way to increase time and attention on our platforms, was to just get people really angry. And Lawrence has a way of describing it as a cognitive black hole of addictive anger that these algorithms have created. So our vision is to not do that and to monetize through subscriptions. And, I think Elon Musk came to that conclusion, that he doesn't like having to rely on advertisers either. And he's been trying $7 blue check marks and $16, creator models and all kinds of ways to try to get subscription revenue. But But that really is an essential component of this, to change the incentive structure, which is that instead of this sort of implicitly gamified experience where, we give the big platforms all of our content, all of our time and attention, and in return we get a dopamine hit. Lawrence and I have a vision, which is, let's have a circular economy where people are paying into the platform through a subscription model, and they have the possibility of getting all of their money back if they optimize their content to the algorithm. And if they do that, they get points, and they get recognized on a leaderboard, and that point system can translate into a reward structure. So that's our vision, our roadmap for how to monetize this. At this point, we've been completely bootstrapped, 100% bootstrapped, no outside investment. Our vision is to raise most of the money through crowdfunding, because we really envision what Lawrence and I think of as a circular economy, where the creators are the ones who are putting in a little bit of money and potentially getting all or most of it back, where the top writers could potentially make a living through their earnings using our platform. And so we see crowdfunding as a way to really remain in alignment with the ethos of this platform and of this AI. So that's what we're looking at. We are also talking to angel investors right now, and are open to very mission aligned angels who like our vision and want to support it.
One thing that you may not be aware of, Ray, is that I've actually done quite a bit of work with the Pangea social platform. Eric permitted me, based on my writing background. As you know, I wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times for a number of years, and I also was editor of my college newspaper. And so I had a lot of different writing background and style, and I went to use the Pangea social site as one of the beta testers. And I got to tell you, I was amazed at the algorithm. Um, I was really surprised at how it was able to direct me to communicate in a more um, effective manner and in a more structured type of discussion. Because what I found from my writing, and Eric can attest to this because he saw some of the samples, was that it was very much a one thought upon another thought, where the reader would have been a lot better off just getting a simple statement at the beginning and then going further. And it could be just part of the writing style, but the point that I'm making is that I think the same thing that I do is in my writing is just to communicate the way I normally communicate. And I think a lot of people do that in their emails, and a lot of people do that in their conversations, and they write something or even prepare a paper. And what this really does is it really helps you to understand that certain words have tonality to them that people interpret in a way that you may not understand yourself. So there were many suggestions, because the site itself will say, well, here's some things that you should really think about changing. And what is interesting about it is that it really does follow a lot of the logic of other AI models that I use. So, I use AI every day. I'm building a lot of things on my own founder level. So I'm doing a lot of different things that are kind of fun and exciting. We can't talk about them now, but I am using AI. And what I'm seeing from Pangea Social is that they are a step above even some of the large language models that we have right now. I don't believe can do what Pangea Social is doing. So if there's any investors out there that are interested, you've got Lawrence and Eric to start talking to. But you're going to have to work through me, because I'm going to try to step in front of them. So.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this a little bit, about how it identifies the type of language, and whether it's a word that is inciting, certain emotion versus being more neutral, being more inclusive. I've read words like this on the website. Lawrence, how does the algorithm do that, and is it learning from the community as it goes along too?
Yes. So you have in the dictionary, it's a dictionary of bigrams. So each word combination is being tracked separately from each other word combination. And then it turns out that some word combinations have more dimensionality of meaning than other word combinations. So some bigrams are flatter and some have a kind of a bushier way of reaching out into other words. And what all these suggestions come from is the desire to get your writing to branch out faster, so that you're touching more of the world of meaning, and you're doing it with less words.
Interesting. Is there a risk of either of certain kinds of bias, like let's say cultural or gender or age? You know,
Yes.
how are you addressing this
Bias is an
area?
interesting phenomenon when you look at the map that it internally draws of what you've written, because it looks at bias as a way, as a case where you branched out into something that's sort of a dead end. And it could be a dead end for two reasons. One reason might be that um, nobody's going to understand you. Like you said something that is kind of like a bit of a non sequitur. So that's a dead end from that standpoint. And then the other dead end is where you've said something that is just leads to more of the same. Like you said something that's kind of like a tautology or self-reinforcing viewpoint. So like if it turns out there's like 5 ideas you believe in and they all just point to each other, that's very bad, and the dictionary can find that. So when when you're getting this guidance, it's trying to keep you what we call open-minded. It's trying to keep you and your audience on an open-minded frame, and that we think is what really is the driving force behind Socratic dialogue. I mean, all the things that Socrates taught was to become more open-minded and not to ever give up the struggle.
Interesting. Eric, how do we take this model and grow it? What's your path or plan or your vision for how we get a critical mass of users to really give this thing some legs and to go?
So yeah, there are a couple of things. One is really honing in on the ideal beta tester, which is someone like Alan, who loves to write, who is very thoughtful about the way they like to use language, and really it has maybe had an experience of a human editor, and they really enjoy the way that Pangea can provide that kind of external guidance, that more objective viewpoint on what you're doing, that a human editor, a really good human editor, can give you. So we've identified a great group of beta testers who fit that profile, who are using the initial beta product that we have and giving us feedback on how we can make it better. Beyond that, the next phase is how do we go viral? How do we create this critical mass? And that is going to involve really influencer marketing, just kind of and so we have some great advisors lined up who have communities of 300,000 people or millions of people who are in our beta group. And so as we get the product a little closer to being ready for production, where we add some more of the critical features that need to get added, like right now it's just a writing editor, and so we're getting ready to add the conversation thread component. That's where we can then start bringing in you and Alan and other early fans that we have of the platform who have communities, and getting them to bring their existing communities onto the platform because they see the value in it. A lot of these people would be what we would call journalist activists. So they're really interested in the way that belief structures inform online communications, and are very passionate about how we can transform social media into a place that supports democracy rather than tears it down.
So are these beta writers more like a journalist type of person, or bloggers, influencers?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's the profile. That's our ideal beta tester for right now. And we believe that from that core group, it will really accelerate, because these are people who are good writers also. And so just like in the early days of Facebook and Twitter, it's something like 80% of the people wouldn't write a thing. They just like to read what everyone else was writing. And so we think there's a lot of people who will come here because it's really entertaining. There's going to be great content, great conversations optimized using this algorithm. Just like people, like I pay $50 a year to have that premium Medium subscription so that I can see the best stuff. We believe there are a lot of people who will come to Pangea Social for that same reason.
I wonder, Ray, if you can pull up the website and just kind of show our audience a little bit about that. Maybe we can just talk about some of the things that it actually does.
Sure. Let me get that up here. Give me 1 second.
I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting is the fact that it gives you almost instantaneous feedback, um, and so we won't be able to see it because we're not going to be able to actually log in and do a demo of it. And
Yeah, but right
but
there on that screen, yeah,
yeah,
if you
on this
back up,
screen, this
it's yeah.
go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, it's basically a Grammarly style interface. So
Mhm.
whatever you're writing, it will automatically highlight areas that you should address, and then it gives guidance, like Alan was saying. Hey, consider removing these words. It doesn't tell you what to replace them with. It forces you to think about how you could say it more concisely. And when you follow that guidance, it, as Lawrence was saying, it creates a higher dimensional way of expressing an idea that will engage a conversation and engage a more open-minded conversation.
And so that was the landing page. I'm clicking over onto the how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here you are, Eric. Look at
Yeah,
that.
there's a little demo video that we have there for our beta testers, so they can see me using it in action, and we've got these little help tooltips that pop up when you're using the editor. So yeah, so it's the early days, but we have a functional live product, and a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I think that's something too. As far as we talk about the path, there's a lot of ideas that you have that you're continuing to do building of those and incorporating that into the overall product. And there's lots of things that as a beta tester that you would be able to see and really get an advantage of because you have an immediate feedback loop and you're able to use the improvements of what you're writing immediately. So if you're posting somewhere else in a blog, you're going to have a lot better response because that's really what the algorithm's getting at. If you are delivering communications live and you want to have a prepared set of statements, it's a wonderful way to do it as well. So you can go ahead and put things in, and then it will tell you that, okay, this isn't really effective for your audience. And it won't tell you in that direct way. It'll say you should consider the following changes, which, for me was almost every word. I was trying to figure out how bad I could score, and I was successful. And then I finally worked through and I wrote a wonderful piece where I scored really high. And I was like, that is really good writing, though. And so I'm a validator of saying that, given my writing experience and everything, I know that it definitely is taking advantage of AI in a way that, I don't think that the other models that are out there can do. So again, going back and saying, I believe that the Pangea Social is really onto something and they need to get funded and they need to continue the work they're doing. I know, Ray, we're coming up on our time here too. Was there anything else you wanted to ask?
I wanted to throw out one other idea to Lawrence and Eric, and I do love, Alan, how we do these things. It's really fresh. We don't rehearse. We don't talk about questions we're going to ask and things like that. So, look at these guys. They're laughing already, going, okay, where are we headed? But okay, I'm a CPA. I'm a technical guy, right? So I do a lot of technical writing where, I use specific words and stuff like that. And I want to talk about the evolution of the concept of what you do. And I think it's fantastic, by the way. I think that I've avoided a lot of social media for the very reasons, Lawrence, that you talked about earlier. It's just, anyway, it incites anger and excitement and outrage, and that, I just don't want to, I don't need that. I don't want to do that. I got enough of that other areas. So, but I'm thinking of a business use case for this thing. And we talked about influencers, bloggers, social media. Marketing PR seems like the next logical evolution of a business use case of this tool, this model. And I think there's an incredible amount of value that a marketing PR type of professional could gain from using your tool. So I would just encourage you. Have you thought about the business use cases for the Pangea Social tool in the future?
Yeah, that's been presented to us by people who have looked at it, and there's a couple of things that the business people want. They want to get everything done better and faster and cheaper. so my attempt to become a novelist using my own tool isn't going to really interest them at all. But the thing that they would like is maybe the same guidance that we provide now, but maybe fed into like some kind of a model that would then spit out the finished text based on the guidance. And that we probably will provide that real soon.
Yeah. And I don't even see it as a finished text, right? The way I see AI currently is it's a great place to start, maybe even one or two iterations to try to polish, but then the final version that you're going to send out really should have your own edits and touches on it. Make it your own, absolutely. Right?
Yeah, when you look at what a large language model can produce, and by the way, we use ChatGPT to answer those questions too, and just to see what it would say, and it said stuff that's very copacetic. It's like it sounds reasonable, but it also sounds kind of boring, and it's because ChatGPT is an average of what everybody in the world is saying, and so you're not going to get surprises, except when it hallucinates.
Yeah, and another point of that, we're just going back to, if you think about it from the strategy that they have, they're taking a collection of various areas and brought them into the beta testing.
Alan, you cut out there for a second. Guys, can you tell us, there's been a lot of ChatGPT in the news lately, and
okay, now
you're still you're still cutting out, Alan.
Yeah, your screen's frozen.
Where do you guys see the future of AI? Where are we at now, and where are we going with AI? It's moving so fast. And Alan, when you come back, we'll get your question back on, but you're still a little fuzzy.
Well, I can say a little bit about
having some time. So
you can say a little bit about it. I mean, I had this analogy that came to mind. It was like AI is kind of like the bear in the novel Shardik. He kind of barges into the plot line from time to time, completely wrecks everybody's plans, and then disappears. And it's like every 5-10 years, like for a while, Japan thought we were going to eat their lunch with AI, and the AI company I worked for in Pittsburgh got a huge amount of their funding from Japan, because it was like, the Japanese were scared to death that we were going to take over software with AI. Of course, it was premature. It didn't happen, but it could have happened if they hadn't overplayed their hand at the company I worked at. But now LLMs are looking like they're going to eat everybody else's lunch. And sure, I think there's a good chance that because of what's going on at OpenAI, that you'll end up with Microsoft having a monopoly on some kind of product in AI that will probably drive the GNP of the country up 3 or 4 percentage points. It could easily happen, but at the same time, we're going to have this problem of massive collapse in trust, and there's going to be disinformation like we've never seen before, because it's produced automatically by a computer. So we could very well end up in World War III with a fabulously successful version of Microsoft, and that doesn't really fit very well with me.
No way. Eric, what do you think? Where do you see us going with AI? I tell people often, like a lot of tools man has come across, it can be used for good or evil.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see both pathways really clearly. My friend David Pasiak has created an amazing platform using custom GPTs on OpenAI, where, and he's been posting just his journey all year on Facebook of, and he was a religious studies scholar at Princeton in their PhD program. And so and I worked with him at Visible Technologies 15 years ago. So he's got a really interesting background in tech and philosophy, and he loves using Open AI ChatGPT, as do I. It's like the ultimate tutor, the ultimate co-pilot, the ultimate assistant that can create copy that you would have never thought of. That's really good. It does open our ability to think in different ways, and to have this collaborative assistant that's really powerful. So I think that what large language models are doing in many ways is fantastic for the people who have embraced it and are using it. And so he's figured out how to engineer all these business workflows that just give you 10x productivity gains. But like Lawrence was saying, there's no ethics to that, and and it's based on the ethical model of that linear capitalism that makes people really unhappy. So it's not everyone who can find that wonderful engagement out of an AI assistant that is super smart and can provoke you to think of new things that you wouldn't have thought of. So I think it is going to need these ethical guardrails that have to be a different model, a different paradigm than a large language model, than running Boolean queries in a giant matrix. And that's what Lawrence has invented. He's using these dynamic language trees that really structure language in a way that's more human, that's more thoughtful, and that really does open your mind. And if you think of kind of what makes authoritarian thinking, it is closed-mindedness more than anything. And so, to the extent that Lawrence's model opens your mind and it kind of forces you to think in a higher dimensional way. OpenAI doesn't do that necessarily. It does wonderful things, but it really brings us into a potentially terrifying future if we're not careful with it.
Thank you, Alan. I think you're back. You
am.
had a closing question for us?
No, I was just making the point that the AI learning that's taking place at Pangea Social is really interesting because they're using a top tier of writers, and they're learning even more from those writing styles and from the words they use. And I just thought that it was kind of interesting to think about the feedback loop that the tool actually has, because I think it would be interesting for every article that I'm looking at on the internet to have a rating before I even look at it, because I think half of the things that I click on, I would not be clicking on if I just looked at the Pangea Social rating and then said, okay, I'm not looking at that.
Now I'd pay for that.
Hmm.
All right.
We've gotten that feedback a lot, and so that is definitely one of our product opportunities with this. Absolutely.
Sounds great. Well, I want to encourage all of our listeners to check you guys out. Again, this is Pangea Social, PangeaSocial.com, PangeaSocial.com. You can click right there to become a beta user and participate in this product development, as we've talked about here in the show. Lawrence, if our listeners would like to get a hold of you or contact you in any way, what's the best way to do that?
Send me email, and
you want to broadcast that, or you want to go to the website?
At PangeaSocial.com. Just send me an email and get back to you.
All right. And what was that? That again, it was
LAU.
Okay.
At PangeaSocial.com.
Sounds great. And Eric, if our listeners want to reach you, how do they reach you?
Eric at PangeaSocial.com.
Ray, how do we reach you?
I am Ray, R-E-Y, at avoidcrisis.com. And we welcome listener feedback, ideas for stories and guests and storylines. Alan, what about you? What's your contact info?
Alan, ALLEN, at avoidcrisis.com. And we encourage our listeners to subscribe and to continue to hear all the different things that we're talking about at Avoid Crisis. We have so many different things to talk about in the future. And the future is going to be very different as a result of AI and by the type of founders that we're talking to today. So hope that people are going to tune in, and very thankful to have both you, Lawrence, and Eric today. And thank you for your time. And it was really great having you and learning more about Pangea Social. And we hope that you have a great response from this.
Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.